When the world is just too much, turn it off and turn on positive, encouraging K-Love.
I'm gonna praise.
World off. K-Love on.
K-Love is sunshine for my soul.
I love K-Love.
Listen now on your radio, online, or on the free K-Love app.
K-Love makes me feel so good.
Positive, encouraging K-Love.
Welcome to the History of the Papacy podcast, a podcast about the history of the popes of Rome and Christian Church. Prepare yourself to step behind the ropes and leave the official tour of the story of the popes and Christianity. I am your host, Steve Guerra, and I thank you for joining me on this journey. You can find show notes, how to contact me, sign up for our mailing list, and how to support the History of the Papacy by going to our website, a2zhistorypage.com. Two great ways to support the History of the Papacy are leaving your ratings and reviews on Apple Podcasts or your podcatcher of choice. And another really great way to support the History of the Papacy is by going and joining us on Patreon at patreon.com/History of the Papacy. Your support on Patreon goes a long, long way to help keep the History of the Papacy sustainable for a long time in the future. There are 4 tiers of support on Patreon: Antioch, Alexandria, Constantinople, and Rome. Each of these tiers represents one of the traditional patriarchates of early Christianity. There are many great benefits to you for supporting the show on Patreon. You will receive early and advertisement-free content, bonus episodes, monthly book drawings, and most importantly, you will be included on the History of the Papacy diptychs. In traditional Christianity, the diptychs are the lists of bishops commemorated in order of their precedence. The sooner you sign up on Patreon, the higher you'll be on the lists of the History of the Papacy patrons. Now let us commemorate the Patreon patrons on the History of the Papacy diptychs. We have Roberto, Yoren, William B., Brian, Jeffrey, Christina, John, Sarah, William H., and Judy at the Alexandria level. We have Doppel, Paul, Justin, Lana, John, Steve, and Sean, all of whom are magnificent at the Constantinople level and reaching that ultimate power and prestige, that of the See of Rome. We have Peter the Great, Alex the Great, Amma the Great, Frederick the Great, and Jeffrey the Great. And with that, here is the next piece of the mosaic of the history of the popes of Rome and Christian Church. Welcome back to the History of the Papacy podcast as we continue our journey through the history, politics, theology, and drama of the Catholic Church and popes during the tumultuous 19th century. I've called this series the end of the Middle Ages, and in many ways it was the end of the Middle Ages for both the papacy and the Catholic Church as an institution, and you could say in a way for the country of Italy or for the Italian peninsula. A few episodes back, we had a series with Storia d'Italia podcaster Marco Capelli about the Risorgimento, or Italian unification. Marco gave us the story of the Risorgimento up to about the 1860s, but the story continued well after that. The rest of the story of the Risorgimento really needs to be fleshed out because it gives us so much to chew on for the rest of Pius IX's papacy and what you might call the fallout of the end of the Middle Ages papacy. In this mini-series, inside of a series about the end of the Middle Ages papacy, I'm joined by Joseph Pascone, host of the Turning Tides podcast, to give you the rest of the story on the Risorgimento and the messy process of not only creating Italy, but also creating Italians. Each episode of this series stands well by itself, but they work best if you listen to them all together. Between this series with Joseph and the earlier series with Marco, you will get a great perspective on how the Risorgimento and church worked together and at odds for most of the 1800s. I highly encourage you to go and listen to the Turning Tides podcast. You can find it on all the usual places you can find podcasts and also on social media. You can find the podcast on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook at The Turning Tides Podcast and on Twitter at Turning Tides Pod. I will also include links to all of that in the show notes. So I hope you enjoy, and I'll talk to you soon. Welcome to a very special collaboration between the History of the Papacy and Turning Tides podcast. I am very excited to be talking with Joseph Pascone of the Turning Tides podcast to talk about the Italian unification. We've talked about the Italian unification at different points along the way in the history of the papacy, but today Joe is going to lead us through the many incredibly interesting details and the points of contention in the Italian unification. And we'll talk about the reasons for the unification, the difficulty of the process, the conflict with the papacy and the church, along with how Italy was ultimately united. Thank you so much, Joe, for joining us. Do you like Joe, Joseph? Do you prefer?
Whatever. Yeah, whichever you'd prefer is fine. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's really my pleasure, and I can't wait to dig into this.
Oh, yeah. It's a super interesting part of history that no one really brings up. Like most histories of Italy, it stops at like the second unification happens, and then they're like, oh, that's it. The come back again. Or they might mention that there were millions of immigrants who went to America, Great Britain, places like this. But they don't say why. They just say, oh, general poverty and war, but they don't go into the details of what that really is.
Your podcast you're in a multi-part series. I think you just released part 5, or was it 4? 4 or 5? Part 4 of this story, and you're starting to get into these really tricky issues. Maybe where did this whole idea, just to refresh everybody's memory, why Italian unification? Because it really wasn't a natural thing. Nobody really was thinking this up until a certain point in history. Maybe get us at least planted our feet somewhere.
Oh, yeah, sure. So the basic general idea of Italy, it started with the Roman Empire. After the Roman Empire collapsed, Italy was separated into a dozen different ecclesiastical or ducal estates, usually controlled directly by foreign powers, either France, Austria, people like this. But also like the Islamic caliphates controlled Sicily for a really long time. The Norman Vikings controlled parts of southern Italy for a really long time. The Lombards, which was a barbarian, quote unquote, barbarian tribe, ended up settling in modern day Lombardy around Milan and places like that. So this was it was a massive sort of coming together of a bunch of different cultures. You even see this in the Iron Ages and the Bronze Ages. There were Phoenicians and Greeks and native Italic peoples and Celtic tribesmen. They were all trying to come together, and they saw that this was a breadbasket. It could be easily, defended from the coast or from the mountains in the interior. And they found they ended up coming together in a way that was, it set up history. It set up the history that Italy is known for. It's known for its different aspects of culture and its different regional dialects and different regional beliefs. And it started because of this Roman Empire collapsing. Where Italian unification really starts to get going again is with Napoleon Bonaparte. He invades northern Italy in 1796. And this isn't the end all be all. This is when it directly starts. I have a book called The Risorgimento and the Unification of Italy, where it argues that Italian unification started in the 1750s. So it's not a specific line in the sand where Italian unification begins and then ends. It was a gradual thing. It had to do a lot with the Renaissance and medieval times and these different city-states that were in Italy at that time and how they dealt with the world around them. A lot of these places became super powerful. Places like Genoa, Florence was a capital of trade and art for a very, very long time, way up until the 19th century, 20th century. But yeah, with Napoleon Bonaparte, he invades northern Italy, 1796, destroys the Piedmontese army that's opposing him and the Austrians, very quickly solidifies control and has several different Italian republics declared. And for the first time is actually building roads between other Italian constituencies, which never happened before. Not since the Roman Empire. You see these roads connecting all these separate parts of Italy. So this was the first real start of the Risorgimento. Even the Italian flag that we have today is directly based on the French design. Originally, the Italian flag was vertical. Now it's horizontal. But switch around. It was originally horizontal, and now it's vertical. And that was directly based on the French. For a long time after this, the French were the natural sort of big brother of Italians. If you go immediately following this period, you see in 1848, the mass risings there in places like Milan. Venice had a very big rising. Also, all over the central Italian duchies, very big risings, which led to the War of 1848, which Marco covers perfectly in the series you do with him on that. I also cover it in my second and third episodes. But yeah, the initial start of unification happens from Piedmont, which is a very small constituency, a small kingship in the Northwest. Its capital city was Turin. But it was the only state in the entire peninsula that could claim that it was actually Italian. The House of Savoy was an institution in Italy for 850 years or something up until this point. So they had the political and the prestigious cred to be able to advance their aims. And King Charles Albert was the first one to declare war against Austria in support of the uprising in Milan. That led to really disastrous few engagements, including the first Battle of Custoza, Battle of Novara in 1849 was another complete disaster for the Piedmontese. It led to King Charles Albert being having to abdicate the throne in favor of Victor Emmanuel II. And with his rise to power, you see the liberalization, the semi-liberalization of the Italian state. His first choice for prime minister is a guy named Massimo D'Azeglio. This is the guy who famously said, "We've made it Italy, now we must make Italians." But as the prime minister of Piedmont, he manages to uphold the constitution, which was decreed by Victor Emmanuel's father, Charles Albert. It's called the Albertine Statute. He refused to call it a constitution because he couldn't stand the idea of something like that existing. He was like, no, it's a statute. And if you look at this was the law of the land, even past unification up until 1929. I mean, if the fascists are able to work with a constitution, it must not be too good of a constitution. It was a very conservative document. Even the Austrians following the war, they looked at it, they said, oh, okay, so it's basically, you have the same powers, basically. Usually a constitution, it defends the people's rights to, self-expression, freedom of religion, press, etc. This defended the royal right to, make appointments, control foreign policy. This was the kind of document it was.
Steve here. We are a member of the Parthenon Podcast Network, featuring great shows like Scott Rank's History Unplugged podcast and other great podcasts. Go to parthenonpodcast.com to learn more. And here is a quick word from our sponsors.
When the world is just too much, turn it off and turn on positive, encouraging K-Love.
I'm gonna praise.
World off. K-Love on.
K-Love is sunshine for my soul.
I love K-Love.
Listen now on your radio, online, or on the free K-Love app.
K-Love makes me feel so good.
Positive, encouraging K-Love.
AI can help you write, research, and solve problems faster than ever before. But there is a problem. Most AI is built on a worldview that does not reflect biblical truth. That's why Dominion Chat exists. Dominion brings the power of AI under the lordship of Christ. All the benefits of modern AI built on a biblical worldview foundation. Your work matters, but so does your soul. Sign up today at dominion.chat.
I think it's kind of interesting, and you lay this out really well, is that there's several different polities in the north. There's the papal states in the center, the kingdom of the two Sicilies in the south. They all have like 10 different factions in each one, or it seems like 10 different factions. How would you describe that factionalism? And how do you get somebody to agree to anything when there's so many different parties at each other, and what their version of liberalism is very different than somebody else's version of liberalism, and some of their versions of conservatism or reactionaryism are very different than the other ones. I've never, and maybe in your study of history, have you seen anything that's so complicated as this?
It really can't be doubled. You can't find another example of it. Either this was because of the geopolitics of the area. Italy itself is a very sectioned off place geographically. It's separated by rivers and massive mountains and hills that are nearly intraceable. You can barely go by them, especially back then when there was only, maybe 1,000 miles of railroad in the whole country of 30 million people. So it wasn't like a super advanced society. In fact, if you look at Europe especially, it was one of the poorest countries probably in the whole of Europe, maybe besides Spain. So to deal with this factionalism, one of the main things they did was lie. They just straight up lied. And this is a good way to transition to 1859. The Count of Cavour, who was prime minister of Piedmont, through finagling, through backroom deals, through using his own teenage niece to get close to Napoleon. You could imagine what her job was. They were able to get involved in the Crimean War. They sent a huge expeditionary force of 20,000 men there. They came back heroes, and they got the assurances of France that they would help them in the future against Austria. Now, as this new war happened, there were a bunch of different pieces that needed to be put together. There were the Democrats who absolutely detested Napoleon III because he was the same guy who destroyed the Roman Republic of 1849. So, and this guy, he was well known for press censorship and for silencing political enemies. But he also had such a strange dichotomy where he was seen as this modernizing force. Napoleon III is one of the most interesting people in history, not just because he's his uncle's nephew. I mean, he was himself a very strange, anachronistic character in history for sure. But thanks to his machinations and his belief in the Italian state, he was able to start the War of 1859 with Austria, thanks to Austrian bellicosity, if that's a word.
I like it. Yeah.
Sure. And in that war, it's a very short war, 2 hellish engagements, Solferino and Magenta. In those 2 battles, France comes out on top, even though it costs something like 30,000 casualties in both the fights. It's the Solferino especially is the deadliest fight since the Battle of Leipzig, and it wouldn't be recreated. Numbers, casualties until World War I. So it was a massive, massive engagement. It was a 17-mile long fight. This is like something I can't even to picture this. It's impossible. I mean, Dan Carlin says it a lot. He says the mind reels, and that's what it's sort of like. I mean, where 40,000 people were either killed or wounded. In the 4th episode of my series, I go more into detail on this and the war specifically. But basically, this war ends in Italy's victory. They end up capturing Lombardy, which is Milan. But Napoleon III sets up a peace agreement without the knowledge of Piedmont or basically their allies. So through this peace, the Peace of Villafranca, they recognized Lombardy as a part of Italy, or a part of North Italy, because back then there was still North Italy, and then the duchies, and then the Papal States, and the two Sicilies. It was a big, giant cluster bomb of political entities and different ideals. And what Cavour's plan is he can't invade directly the two Sicilies. Two Sicilies has by far the largest army in the entire Italian peninsula. They could call on a standing army of 100,000 men. Now, these 100,000 men were only used really to police their own citizens, because the two Sicilies was well known for their political backwardness, I guess is the best way to put it. They were a supremely authoritarian state. They had something like 20,000 political prisoners in their dungeons in the middle of the Mediterranean. It was, and these were political prisoners who said, "Oh, you probably shouldn't, murder your own people in the streets." This is what they were going to jail for. So this was a huge problem. I mean, the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies was a backward place, but from this backwardness, there came like a paternal almost feeling from the peasants toward their king or their leaders. You see this especially on the border with the Papal States and the two Sicilies. The very large border. They hold a lot of the same beliefs, especially then around 1860. And basically what Cavour does, he sends a volunteer. He sends a volunteer force secretly under Garibaldi, Giuseppe Garibaldi. We talked about a lot in the last series. He's a huge figure in this also. He defeats the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies in Sicily. Then he goes to the mainland. He defeats them at the Battle of Volturno. But the Battle of Volturno is such a big catastrophe for both sides that Garibaldi can't continue his conquest of the rest of the peninsula. This leads to Piedmont invading both the Papal States and then the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies, leaving Rome alone at the behest at the request of Napoleon III. And for the first time since 1500 years prior, there was a single Italian nation. Now, this is where a lot of the storybooks end. This is the end of the Risorgimento. Really, it wasn't. I mean, still to this day, there are still people who question what Italy really is, or what the function of the Italian nation is supposed to be for. But then started the Brigandaccio. In the Brigandaccio, or the Brigand War, there's a lot of falseness about this whole conflict. A lot of it is either through just ignorance, or it's a genuine attempt by the powers that be to sort of make this whole scenario seem like nothing but a big conspiracy by the Pope and the Bourbons. This was really a class rising. This was the lowest of the lowest class of the two Sicilies, rebelling against the Italian nation, because a lot of the same rights that they enjoyed under the Bourbon leadership, they didn't enjoy anymore. I'll give you an example. In the two Sicilies, the king technically owned the peasantry. They were his more or less slaves. So it was in his best interest to treat these people well. So he gave them state land, which was free to work for any person if they wanted. This same state land would be sold en masse to the very small middle class of the South, who would quickly throw their support behind the Italian state. And so you see the worst aspects of these things all sort of bubble to the surface. You see in this brigand conflict, the different powers that be jockeying for position. The Bourbons and the Papal States were supporting these rebels. There were quite a lot of them. There were maybe 80,000 at most at the peak of this conflict, while the Italian state was literally butchering people who went against them. I mean, there's so many different things you can point to. Even during the War of 1859 at a place called Branti in Sicily, there was a similar rising like this. And one of Garibaldi's lieutenants, Nino Bixio, he went there. He quickly quelled it. he shot 5 people who were given an hour to present a defense. One of these people was an illiterate beggar who couldn't even write a defense. So there wasn't much chance for anything to really happen there. And then from there, you see not only in southern Italy, like the boot of Italy, Calabria, there's a lot of rebellious activity, but also in the middle of Italy, in the Romagna, in the former papal holdings, there's a huge amount of resentment toward this new state. And on top of this, a lot of the plebiscites for unification, they were complete shams. I mean, today you would call them a sham. Back then, they were probably some of the fairer elections that you could find, but there would be massive celebrations to coincide with the votes for unity. So it wasn't much of a you have a choice, really. And a lot of these poorest people were dragged to the polling stations by their landlords, by the local archbishop or the local priest. It was a setup sort of thing. They knew what was going to happen, and if it didn't happen the way they wanted, they would just change the results. You see this in the future with the Italian country. People who were against the powers in charge, they found themselves in jail on election day over a trumped up charge. And this was happening all across the country. So one of the biggest pieces of, or one of the most important moments, I think, in this brigandaccio, the brigand war, or the first Italian Civil War, which I prefer to call it because that's really, I think, what it is. 45 Piedmontese soldiers were executed at a very small town called Ponte Landolfo. You can look this up. Ponte Landolfo, to this day, it's not recovered from what happens. So when General Cialdini figures out that his men were executed by this town with the help of these rebels, he gives the order that not a stone on a stone should remain standing. So that means complete annihilation. This is an ancient Roman order that was only used for the worst of Rome's enemies. I mean, this was the order given against Carthage and against some Gallic tribes, and for example. So Cialdini sends 500 of the elite men of Italy's army, the bersaglieri, or the sharpshooters, to this town, and they annihilate the entire population. The people that they don't kill there at the town, they execute later in mock trials. I mean, as they approach, the brigands just went back off into the hills because they weren't going to fight the regular Italian army on their own footing. That's not the way they fought. It was very much like a Vietnam sort of situation. That they were enemies they couldn't see. They pop out and then they go back to the fields and pick up a hoe and start working. This is the kind of thing it was. In the end, we don't know how many people died at Ponte Landolfo. The lowest number I've seen, which is on Wikipedia, is like 13, which is pretty insane considering the descriptions we have of what actually happened. Christopher Duggan, who wrote The Force of Destiny, he claims 400 people were executed in the town, and then several hundred were afterward. Another author I have, I'll grab him up right here. Another author I have called Antonio Ciano. He says that at least 1,000 people were executed, if not more. This is the whole town. I mean, the whole town was massacred, not to mention the numerous, innumerable accounts of sexual assault against the women of the town and little boys. People with rings had their fingers chopped off. People with gold teeth had their cheeks ripped open by bayonets. It was one of the most horrifying modern examples of state violence that I could find before World War II. And it's not a surprise that this is the same nation that in 60, 70 years becomes the first fascist country in the world. This is how it started. It started with people like Cialdini. It started with Victor Emmanuel. And in a lot of ways, it started with Giuseppe Garibaldi, too. He gave the unrealistic, romanticized image of the Italian culture and the Italian people. And I love Garibaldi. So I think that he was one of the few people who have actually walked the walk and talked the talk during history.
Steve here again with a quick word from our sponsors.
When the world is just too much, turn it off and turn on positive, encouraging K-Love.
I'm gonna praise.
World
I
off.
praise the mountains.
K-Love on.
K-Love is sunshine for my soul.
I love K-Love.
Listen now on your radio, online, or on the free K-Love app.
K-Love makes me feel so good.
Positive, encouraging K-Love.
AI can help you write, research, and solve problems faster than ever before. But there is a problem. Most AI is built on a worldview that does not reflect biblical truth. That's why Dominion Chat exists. Dominion brings the power of AI under the lordship of Christ. All the benefits of modern AI built on a biblical worldview foundation. Your work matters, but so does your soul. Sign up today at dominion.chat.
He was beyond reproach, at least in his life for most of it. But still, he has to have that claim. And even future fascists loved Garibaldi. I mean, Benito Mussolini put up statues of his wife. This shows the dichotomy. I mean, even today, modern leftists point to someone like Garibaldi as like an icon. And in a lot of ways, he was. He supported the Paris Commune, for example. He thought it was the, quote, like the light of the world, the light of the sun, the light of the future. But at the same time, the fascists loved him too. It shows the two-facedness of Italianism. Like, you need to be able to hold these two things at the same time and keep these balls in the air when it's nearly impossible. But that's a little bit of the brigandaccio. And that's just one of the examples. There are a dozen other examples of people who were, just treated like absolute scum, absolute dirt. It was a really sad conflict that we don't know a lot about. And that's sort of intentional. I mean, to this day, we still don't know how many people died. We have a number. The Italian government says 5,000 people were executed. 5,000 people were just killed straight up in like combat. And then another 10,000 were wounded. But this number probably isn't true. It probably isn't even close to what it actually was. For example, in the same book, the Forces of Destiny, he claims maybe 200,000 Italian civilians were murdered. And is it any wonder why 5.5 million Italians left? Just straight up left for another place? They voted with their feet. That's what they really ended up doing because they couldn't bear it anymore. I mean, it was truly one of the most horrifying places to live in. And then the racism experienced by Southern Italians is something that almost no one ever talks about. But if you're a Southern Italian and you have to deal with the Northern Italian, it's still there even to this day. I mean, I remember I was a server in New York City. And I had an Italian table, and they were from North Italy. And I told them I was Sicilian. They were like, "Oh," it was one of those. I was like, "What did I do?"
Yeah,
it's still one of those things that's persistent. And so this was the state of Italy. It was a complete mess. And Massimo D'Azeglio said the thing that we really needed to do was to find a way to have everyone else in Italy hate Piedmontese people less, because that was the big problem. And it wasn't just in the south of Italy. In the north of Italy, like, for example, in the industrial havens like Milan, they were saddled with a much weaker lire. The people of Tuscany, which was by far the freest state in Italy, they didn't have a constitution or anything, but they had a lot of like voting rights and healthcare rights and cultural rights that they didn't have anymore. They had to institute a death penalty that the people of Tuscany didn't even want. And on top of this, military conscription was the first thing. It was the first thing that was installed. And it shows the centralization of power. They just wanted to centralize and centralize and centralize at the expense of local cultures, local dialects, and their own people. It's a really sad story, and it's not one that almost anyone talks about because it's not very fun. They don't have a lot of information on it. It's hard to talk about the sides. It's hard to decide which side was right, which side was wrong, because there really weren't any wrong or right sides on either side. They were two forces of people, two different kinds of people coming together, and obviously conflict arises, just like in any other society, in any other form of culture where a new entity arises. The violence is almost a prerequisite. It's the sad state, but that's unfortunately the case, and it was the case in southern Italy for years. I mean, this wasn't like a few towns were burned down, and a few people were sent to island prisons. It was thousands. It was hundreds of thousands. It was dozens of towns that were looted and destroyed and burned, and it wasn't a good time to be an Italian, especially a Southern Italian. And on top of this, there was the War of 1866 for Venice. Now, the war for Venice with Austria was Italy and Germany against Austria. In Germany, it's called the German Brothers' War. In Italy, it's called the Third War of Italian Independence. The Italians, they get strung out on the line of march, and their entire forces get completely destroyed almost in the Second Battle of Custoza. On top of this, there's the naval battle of Lissa, which is an island in the Adriatic, where two very, very expensive Italian ironclads are completely sank. The Admiral Persano, he's completely removed from command. Same thing with the chief of the army, La Marmora. And again, in a conflict that was supposed to bring Italians together, it ended up separating things even worse. It made it even worse for the state. They had no authority, really. They had no prestige. They only were there because Britain let them do it and France let them do it. In reality, if you were to take the plebiscites again, I'm not sure what would happen. I'm sure most people would have voted for unity because it was that road or the high road. I mean, there wasn't much option. And on top of this, Cavour even promised local autonomy. He said, oh, yeah, Sicilians, don't worry. You won't be conscripted into the army. Just join up and we'll give you, you'll be able to choose your leaders and stuff. This wasn't true. Second, the plebiscites were done, bang, Piemonte's laws. So that's where we head into the year 1867, which is where I start my fourth episode, which seems like a good place to start, like getting into the nitty gritty. So a thing to understand about Italy and Italian politics is when all these people came together, there was no left and right clearly defined like it is now. I mean, back then, the right-wing conservatives wanted to nationalize the railroads, and the left-wing liberals or radicals wanted to keep the electorate small. So it was this very confusing, like, oh, which side? Oh, this side. There was no clearly defined sides, and it only brought about more and more problems for not only Parliament, but the state in general. And you see it whenever they try and pass reforms. There's someone who's on the right side of this coalition who's like, no, I don't want that. Or someone on the left side of the coalition who's saying, well, wait a second, hold on. And no reform is able to get done. On top of this, Italian governments lasted, even to this day, they only last about a year and a half. There were no term limits. You don't have a set time to do the things you want to do. So in the end, a bunch of these governments just end up falling apart because a handful of people disagree with the way they want to go, or they don't have an appointment that's approved, or anything. I mean, if there's like a bad riot, the government falls. That's the level of the Italian state at this point. And a bunch of different times, King Victor, he even contemplated abdicating because things were in such a state of disrepair. The economy was completely sputtering, and to pay for all of these wars, all of these rapid industrialization, all of these railroads, they put the bill on the rest of the Italian peninsula, even though these wars were waged by Piedmont against the rest of the peninsula. It's very interesting. It's very interesting.
When the world is just too much, turn it off and turn on positive, encouraging K-Love.
I'm gonna praise.
World
I
off.
praise the
K-Love on.
K-Love is sunshine for my soul.
I love K-Love.
Listen now on your radio, online, or on the free K-Love app.
K-Love makes me feel so good.
Positive, encouraging K-Love.
AI can help you write, research, and solve problems faster than ever before. But there is a problem. Most AI is built on a worldview that does not reflect biblical truth. That's why Dominion Chat exists. Dominion brings the power of AI under the lordship of Christ. All the benefits of modern AI built on a biblical worldview foundation. Your work matters, but so does your soul. Sign up today at dominion.chat.